read through it, I think my proposal is, a resolution authorizing execution.
Okay, it don't matter.
Ending the term now.
You're both shameful.
And
At this point,
use agreement for both sides.
I'm a Chicago fan. It doesn't matter.
Not a Joliet fan?
Joliet, Chicago.
And they wanted to keep them both together. So you can't extend when it's already expired.
Right, yeah.
So we decided to call it, he used the term development agreement. So I used the term instead of use agreement. Because yeah, so I just sent this out, now I can focus. No, Lopez and this guy.
Good evening. This is a special meeting of the City Council for the City of Joliet, November 29th, 2017. The Honorable Mayor Robert Odekirk presiding. Oh, you should get it.
Sorry, Kristen.
I need a battery.
Have a charger. We'll begin with roll call. Mayor Odekirk.
Here.
Councilman Dickinson.
Here.
Councilwoman Gavin.
Here.
Councilman Girl. Here. Councilman Hug.
Here.
Councilman Morris.
Here.
Councilman Mudrick. Here. Councilwoman Coleman. Here. Councilman Turk.
Here.
First on the agenda is citizens to be heard. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on the budget this evening? Seeing none. Next is the discussion on the city manager's recommended 2018 budget.
Mayor and Council, I'm pleased tonight for the first time to address you and the public as your new city manager. I just want to thank you again for the privilege of serving, and on my third day, it is very unusual to be presenting a budget that I had no hand in putting together. Maybe like you, I've had a chance though for some quick little briefing. I do want to say that, you know, in my career, the budget of a city, especially whether it's a 1 year or long-term budget, is so critical. This is such a key document to help guide not only the financial goals and programs and services of the city, but also to help let the public understand, you know, what's being done with the tax revenue that's coming in to the city, how we're utilizing those in a very reputable way and honest way to help provide good service at the lowest cost possible and in a very effective way. So this budget tonight is, this is kind of the key and first step, which will be followed up with a public hearing if you act on that recommendation tonight for the second meeting in December, and then ultimately adoption that night. According to state law, the budget has to be adopted before the end of December. But I do want to pay special attention to Marty Shanahan, who was interim city manager during the preparation of that, as well as our finance director, who you're going to be hearing from very shortly on this budget. All the directors too, as well as their staff members. Documents of this nature are not prepared, you know, without a lot of effort by many, many people to help provide financial and budgetary information so that you can make the best possible financial decisions for this community on this annual budget. So with that, I'd like to kind of turn to Marty Shanahan to kind of give you a few other opening comments on this budget he worked so hard on. And then Marty, if you want to go ahead and introduce the finance director to make the presentation of the highlights of the budget to be discussed tonight by the council.
Sure, just very briefly, there are a couple of things that we did just recently, and that was some organizational chart changes. So that's something that is not contained in this particular document. But as for the rest of it, I'm just going to introduce Mr. Gadati.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thanks for having me before you today. First thing I'd like to say is the budget is a very fluid document. It changes. As a matter of fact, as soon as it was printed, I had some changes that had to be incorporated already. Some of the things is we created a St. Joseph Presence tax increment financing district. That is not in the budget, but it will be in the final budget. It won't have any expenditures next year, but it probably will have some tax collections. But that's just an example. The budget is a fluid document. It's not etched in stone. It almost changes monthly. You always are getting budget amendments before you. So the budget is our legal document. It's we cannot make appropriations between cost centers, and our cost centers are by department. So each department, their budget, legal level of control is their bottom line. But to move the budget appropriations from one department to another will take council action. So if I may start, if you have any questions, go ahead and stop me and I'll be answer them. If I can't answer them, I will go back and research them and get back with you. The first three slides we have, this is an overview of all of our funds. This document is in the budget. As you can see, the city manager's recommended budget recommends $253 million. That's your bottom right-hand number in revenue. You see the budget is required to have 2 prior years, the current year budget, the manager's recommended budget, and the city council approved budget. The city of Joliet has added a column where we were at 6 months and the departmental request. The expenditures for all the funds put together, we now have 20 funds. Is 283 million, almost 284 million. The next slide shows our unassigned fund balance, and in accrual funds is what we call net position. The total is 246.5 million. That's basically what the city is worth today. Unassigned fund balance and what is not appropriated in any of the cost centers. The general fund, we have recommended revenues of 174.6 million. Expenditures of 183 million, which will require use of fund balance about $8.6 million. I will get to that in a later slide. The water and sewer fund, we're looking at expended revenue of 52.2 million, expenditures of 54.7 million, a use of net position of about 2.54 million. What also is in this budget is $9.51 million in capital expenditures in the water and sewer fund. If you remember when we had the rate study, we anticipated to spend about $10 million out of our funds for water and sewer fund capital improvements. So 9.51 is pretty close to the 10 million, so we're keeping on track with that rate study. The parking fund looks about 1.81 million in revenue, 1.91 million in expenditures, and to use about $100,000 of current fund net position. One thing I want to point out, which was just approved by the city council, is 178, almost 179,000 is allocated in 2017 to replace some parking meters with pay and display terminals. We hope to have that done by the end of the year. The current budget is operating the parking system as is, and that means as we're running it currently. We are having a rate study done on the parking system itself that will be coming to council sometime in early 2018.
Excuse me. So those revenues should go up then?
Yes, they should.
Okay, thank you.
And about the parking system, we're gonna have a lot of changes in the next few years, especially with what's going on with Will County and the exchange of parking lots and stuff like that. Once the county gets their new building up, then we will have to build a parking lot for them. That is in the capital in this budget.
Thank you, Jim.
So to look a little bit more at our what happens in the general fund, it supports all our general activities: police and fire, planning and economic development, engineering, code enforcement, garbage, legal, financial, and general administration. Our water and sewer fund has 3 wastewater treatment plants, 539 miles of combined and separate sanitary sewers, 26 wells, 11 treatment plants, 580 miles of water main, 7,535 fire hydrants, and 38 lift stations. Quite a challenge to run that system. The parking system we operate, we have 2 parking decks, currently 7 parking lots, 700 on-street meters. As we said, that is going to be changed to pay stations, and the Joliet Union Station parking lots. This is a brief picture of our 3 operating funds. We are recommending $234 million for the 2017 budget. A 2.25% increase is recommended for the 2018 proposed budget, about 5.27 million more than what we budgeted in 2017. Some of the highlights in the general fund, the recommended revenues is 174.6, an increase of about 2.2 million, or 1.27% over 2017 budget. One of the main issues in the general fund is the recommendation includes a 3.35 increase in the property tax. That will raise about $1.3 million. An amount of 2.45 is attributed to new construction. Our preliminary estimates from Will and Kendall County say that we have new construction about 2.45%. What that does include an increase of 0.9% is attributed to the growth of the total EAV. If approved, that will go to current citizens.
Jim, you said an increase in the tax, it's an increase in the levy, correct?
Correct.
So the tax rate doesn't change, just the levy changes?
Correct. The preliminary estimates from Will and Kendall County say that our estimated assessed value overall in the city increased 6.45%. This is good news. Our property has finally turned the corner, and we're finally starting to see some increases. So if you can see, new construction was 2.45%. The total was 6.45%. So current grew over 4%. The levy for the library is requested to be the same as 2017, $6,024,815, $24,815. So the 2 new positions that are included in this is, and this is comparing last year's budget to this year's budget. As you know, the human resources manager was added during the year. However, it wasn't in last year's budget. And this budget does contain a new position, economic development specialist, about $89,000 in salary. And through the year, we converted 4 contracted workers in the IT department to full-time status. Those 4 workers were not budgeted last year, but they were approved during the year. The budget was amended, but remember, we're comparing budget to budget. There is also increase requested for the police and fire contributions. The police pension would go up $768,000, and the fire pension would go up $248,000. In this year, 2017, we had the actuarial firm of Gabriel Roeder Smith and Company do a actuarial study on the assumptions in those 2 pension systems. They recommended changing some of the assumptions. The main assumption that we're all familiar with is the interest rate calculation, which would be, they're recommended to lower it from 6.75 to 6.5%. We met with the pension boards. We informed the pension boards of that, and we have agreed to phase that in over a 3-year time frame. If we had assumed all the assumption in year 1, it would have been a $3 million increase. So we can expect to see an increase in the pension contributions in the next 2 years by adopting those assumptions. The main items in the general fund is we've included $200,000 in a citywide comprehensive plan. We do not have one that's up to date as of today. As I said earlier, the county courthouse parking lot we're committed to do that, is $1.16 million. And the budget contains keeping the support of the museum and the Rialto at the 2017 levels. We put $275,000 into the museum, $275,000, and $500,000 to the Rialto. This budget also incorporates a 2% increase for all employees. That 2% is negotiated in the labor contracts, but the budget contains a 2% also for non-union. And it also increases some salaries based on the 2016 salary study. The fire department is overtime set at $1.77 million. That's consistent with what they spent in overtime in 2016. As you know, the legal department went to hiring contractual people. Our settlements are way down. We're anticipating about $250,000, but it's going to take about $1.5 million of professional services to hire outside firms. So it's been kind of a wash. Our settlements are way down, but we do have to pay more for professional services. Over $31.2 million was requested for capital projects. The projects that are recommended is $1 million for the demolition of 121 North Chicago Street. The Will County has said that they will reimburse us that amount, so that's a wash with the revenue. The $10,000 for community yard is consistent with what we had in the 2017 budget. $51,000 for automated fingerprint identification system for the police department. They have indicated that the current system we have is obsolete and that they're going to have to get a new one. There's a 1.1 for the parking lot at the Union Station, and the $800,000 is a continuation of upgrading our computer system that has been approved already. However, those expenditures were not able to do in 1 year, so there's going to be a flop over until 2018. In 2017, we allocated $819,000 for the conversion of street lighting to LED. $658,000 was funded from other sources. This budget continues funding for ash tree removal of about $300,000. In the 3 years, we have removed 8,712 trees. We have 500 to 600 remaining trees by the estimate of the Public Works Department. So we got most of them out. It's going to take a while to get the final ones. This graph is a pie graph, just shows you where the main sources of our income is. And as you can see, sales tax is the highest right now at 26%, and property taxes are about 20%. And the other ones you can see, gaming taxes is what we get from Harrah's in Hollywood. They have been going down, quite frankly, for the last 10 years. At one time, we had 36 million. We're down to about 18 million, about half of what we were. I will say the last 2 months has leveled off. That in October and September, both of them have given us at least the amount that they gave us last year in those 2 months. So let's hope that that has bottomed out and it'll start going up. I wish we had 36 million. And this is just the numbers that break down the previous graph, just give you an indication of how much it is. We have taken into account the state cuts. One of the important things about our revenue is the state passed their budget is July through June. So we have went with status quo. We don't know what the state's doing. Maybe they will cut it again. We will have to come back to the table and discuss if they cut our revenue sharing and our, they charge us 2% for collecting our sales tax. I know there's legislation introduced to cut that to 1%, and we shall see if that goes through. Again, we all hope so. But this does take into account those cuts, but only for the 6 months. Hopefully they'll restore it to prior levels. This is a graph of our expenditures. As everyone knows, it shouldn't be surprised, the police and fire department are our public safety and have the highest expenditures, as should be expected in most cities. The Administrative Services Department, the reason that is so high is all of the city's Blue Cross and Blue Shield and dental and vision is charged to that budget. We don't decentralize that charge. So if you took that 21 million out and spread it out, the administrative services wouldn't look so high, and the rest of the departments are pretty even. This is a graph showing where we spend our money, and it's easy to see. Payroll and benefits. We're up to 77% of our budget is spent on payroll and benefits. This is just the numbers that demonstrate the graph before. The percent change from the estimated year end is 1.4%. We tried to keep the budget as close to the vest as we could. I will say Mr. Shanahan had his red pencil out when we were during budget meetings. This is the items that we include within the budget. The thing here is the City of Joliet, and for the 2017 received the Government Finance Officers Association Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for the first time. The recommended budget includes a 8.7 million use of fund balance. The projected unassigned fund balance of 44.3 million will be 24.2% of our operating expenditures. During our strategic plan, we set a goal of 2 months, which is about 16.67. I will say when we budget a use of fund balance, we're very conservative with our budget. So every position in the city is budgeted that it would be filled for the full year. So it's obvious that that's not going to happen. That's why we pass a budget with a use of fund balance. In some years, we don't use the fund balance as necessary. There may, a few years ago, there was a hiring freeze. So we're very conservative. We probably won't use the 8.7 million because, like I said, we budget every position to be filled year-wide. Some of the departmental highlights, the Administrative Services Department, we budget almost 2 million for payouts upon retirement of sick, vacation, and compensatory time. That is consistent with prior years. There's a small increase in hospitalization. As you know, we are a reimbursement employer. We reimburse the Blue Cross what they pay, and then we pay a third-party fee. We've been very good, I would say lucky, that's a very small increase for hospitalization. One thing that we put in this year's budget, which was not in prior year's budget, is $642,000 to pay off excess vacation time for non-union employees in December of 2018. There is $364,000 budgeted for health and spousal opt-out. That is citywide, and that's consistent with prior years. The one thing that's in there, buildings and grounds, is $132,860 for the new train station. We have made a promise that we would operate that train station. I am quite sure it's not going to be $132,860, but at this point, it's not open. So Marty Shanahan, the interim city manager, and I sat down and tried to compute how many employees we would need for security over there and for janitorial services. There's going to be other expenditures that we don't know yet. That's just the nature of the game when you have a new building. So we might have to revisit that. In the Community Development Department, the subsidies are the same as they were for prior years. $500,000 for Rialto, $270,000 for the museum, $36,800 for the Chamber of Commerce, Will County Community Economic Development, $50,000. The Title 20 program, which we just signed the contract, that's really a pass-through, $170,000. And we also pay $15,000 to PACE for a bus service down to Center Point that was added by Mr. Haka 2 years ago. As I said earlier, there's $200,000, which wasn't in prior year budgets, which we're looking to have a citywide comprehensive plan. Also in the Community Development Department, our tax rebates, which are budgeted at $924,000. Those are rebates that we have given to for incentive for development. Those rebates are listed by entity in the budget. It's about 3 pages long. In the city manager's budget, there's $28,500 for equipment for Channel 6. That was $30,000 in prior years. It was reduced by 5%. And there's a new position for economic development specialist, $49,000 in salary. As we said earlier, the professional and contractual services, about 1.5 million. Legal claims have been reduced to 250,000. In the IT budget, remember this is from budget to budget. All these positions were approved during the year. There's 4 positions that were added as full-time, but we also cut the professional services line item by 420,000. We estimate that the net savings will be about 179,000 by making these people full-time rather than paying a firm on a contractual basis. What's not included in the prior budget is there's an increase for the telephone. We are upgrading our whole system to a cloud-based telephone solution. That will be about $255,000.
Jim,
Yes, sir.
on these new full-time positions, you said that would save about $100 and some thousand dollars. Is
$179,000.
that just comparing salary or is that total compensation?
Total compensation. If you add those salaries up, it adds up to about $295,000. So the rest is, would be savings. Fire department, as I said, there's an increase in the pensions. The overtime is set at what overtime was spent in 2016. The finance department, we budget $1 million in the finance budget for payouts. If you remember in the earlier budgets, we actually pay it out of the administrative services department. But once we pay those out, it increases the IMRF contribution. And years ago, the IMRF would spread that over. Now we have to pay the amount up front. There's $405,000 for our maintenance costs with the Tyler Munis system. That's comparable to prior years. And there's $150,000 for repairs at the Joliet Route 66 Stadium. That is, we budgeted $90,000 in 2017. And we're still hoping that we get naming rights one of these days. That's not included in this budget. Again, the police department pensions again are set at the 2016 levels. I mean, their overtime is, we discussed the increase in the pensions earlier. In public works, we have $300,000 for tree removal, $315,000 for the Hobart Road project, $130,000 for a downtown floodplain consultant, and $250,000 for our sidewalk improvement program. The water and sewer fund. We estimate $52.2 million in system revenues. Expenditures are at $54.7 million, which includes $11 million in depreciation. Requests for operations increased 6.1%, from $32.3 million to $34.3 million. That's just for operations, doesn't include debt or depreciation. We keeping our service levels. There's no increase in our service levels. Provides for maintenance of the aging system. We do have $9.5 million recommended in capital improvements. The department requested $12.3 million. All those requests were not able to be met. As I said in the rate study, they estimated $10 million a year of our money to be spent on capital. A 7% increase, which was approved, is included in this budget. It also includes $85.2 million in infrastructure improvements funded by IEPA loans. In this budget, we created a water replacement reserve fund. It was approved by City Council in 2017 to transfer 100,000 into this fund, and in 2018, 300,000. This transfer was approved when we eliminated the winter averaging, and that was the estimate of how much revenue was raised by the winter averaging, and we have started a reserve fund for someday that we're going to have to replace our water source. I'm going to use a cliche. This is a drop in the bucket. I know it is, but it's a start. As you probably all could guess, 92% of the revenue in the water and sewer fund come directly from charges to our customers. This shows each division within the water system. You can see the last one, debt service, and that is our IEPA and our revenue bonds. It's going to grow in future years. As we borrow more from the IEPA, those debts have to be paid off. They are low interest loans, but they do have to be paid off. And this is shows you where, again, about 30% goes to payroll and benefits. The rest are for maintaining and delivering water and taking sewage from citizens. Parking fund, 1.8 million in revenues. That's an increase of 757,000. I am estimating that we will collect a lot more than we have in the past 2 years as we hire a new collection agency. The contract with the collection agency was agreed upon today, so that contract will be coming to you at not Monday or Tuesday, but the next meeting. It's been a process, but I think we have a good firm, Line Barger, and they're out of Chicago. Service levels are the same as 2017. Expenditures of 1.91 million is expected, about a 4.2% increase. We are recommended using about 100,000 of net position, and there's no capital. We're going to have to address the parking system capital improvements probably within the next year. And as we said earlier, the pay and display stations should be in place by the end of this year. That's going to cost us $179 million, $179,000. 179 million, that's a lot.
That's expensive.
As you can see, most of the revenue comes from just fees and fines. As I said, the parking tickets, we should be able to collect $1 million next year on our outstanding balances with the new collection agency. And this just shows where we spend it. As you can see, most of it is spent on operating the system. With that, I know that's a very brief. You got a recommended budget in front of you. It's about 200 pages long. The city manager, the former interim city manager, happy to entertain any questions.
Mayor, if I could, and council, I just want to turn back to Marty and Jim on one or two other things. This morning, as we were talking about this budget, we also discussed a little bit about what's not in this budget. And of course, finance director has commented on a few of those. I think, Marty, would you just, I think the building study was something recently. Do you want to comment on that? And let's see, was there, and I think overall capital expenditures in the general fund are much more down this year than past. Maybe you could comment, you or Jim, on what's the difference between the funding level of past years and the proposed fiscal year 18.
Well, I'll start with discussing, as you know, we had the building study, which analyzed all of our buildings, and there were some recommendations for upgrading our buildings as well as our fleet needs to be upgraded, and there is not capital in this budget for that. So Jim, maybe if you can talk about the past years.
In the past couple of years, we originally adopted a capital budget very thin, like this year. Then when we closed the books at the end of year, we added expenditures. Some capital items we added during the year. Two of the ones I know for certain were roofs were leaking, so we had to have them fixed. We had to add it. If you remember, 2 years ago, we added 44 police cars because once we closed the books, we had about 4.4 million added to the budget. So we spent that on our fleet. This current year, we originally passed 1.7 million capital budget. Amended during the year, we've added, it's up to 4.7 million, which we will spend in this current year. That is in the projections for the estimated year-end column. All those are listed out in the capital budget if you want to see what the items are that we added. This is a very skinny capital budget. We need to address in the future our buildings and our fleet. Guess that's about it on the capital. It's very thin. I recognize that. But we are budgeting to improve our computer system and our phone system. So it's not like we're not doing nothing, but the buildings they're falling apart. And so we'll need to address that in the future.
Yeah, if I could chime in, because this ties into the point I wanted to make. I think it's good that we're not spending a lot of money at this point. I think, as Mr. Hales, you said in the first 3 days here, we need a comprehensive plan instead of just doing these things piecemeal. We have to just identify what buildings need to be repaired, which buildings we need, or what we could sell, or what we should be demoing instead of throwing more money into it. So I'm glad we're not just throwing money short-term thinking. We have to look long-term. And that does take me back to the 9.51 million we have budgeted for capital expenditures in the water fund. As you mentioned, and it's accurate, we're gonna be spending a considerable amount of money in the future to find a new source of water for the city of Joliet. You think it's wise at this point that we keep throwing about 10 million into infrastructure repair, or should we be taking a longer look at what we know we're going to have to bond out to find a new source of water? Is there a way that we could do this all at once instead of piecemeal as we've been doing? I'm not sure if that would make more sense or not.
If I could maybe just make some comments. I know over in my career, it's especially in the area of water and providing potable water service, and it's based on what limited information I know. The more we can continue to put more details to what some of those future options could be, may be, and what some of the very high conceptual dollar levels might be associated with those, what the revised timeline could be as to when we might lose the productivity from our wells and how much we may need to spend in preparation before that day. All that information, the sooner we can begin to get those answers, I think the better we can put together a long-range financial plan as to what do we need to start putting aside now, and how quickly, do we need to start doing some of these things rather than waiting for the last few years. So just a few comments. I don't know if Jim and Marty had anything else.
The 9.5 million in there are for projects of our system right now. Quite frankly, we can't let it deteriorate. So that's, I went over with Mr. Egan and Allison, and nothing was approved that would be going towards a new water source. It's maintaining our current water mains, maintaining our current wells, maintaining our current sewer system. A rule of thumb is that we should improve all of our capital assets at 2% per year. And that doesn't mean you're going to spend 2% every year. Sometimes you have to spend 1% and spend 3% the next year. But this is consistent with the water study. And there's nothing in here except for, I'll have to turn Mr. Egan, is he here? No, he's not here. I don't know if there's any purchase of property, but we've been purchasing property in anticipation of where the new water source would come from. So really, the 9.5 million is maintaining the current system, not for a new water source.
And I think, that what you just said highlights a problem. Who's been purchasing the property? Because we haven't decided where the water's gonna come from. There's 2 or 3 viable options that the council hasn't decided on. So I don't know why we'd be purchasing property until decision's made by this body about which direction we wanna go.
As city manager said, we do need to come with a comprehensive plan for that in the future to the council. Yes, I agree.
Mayor, and as we know, we have a new committee that appointed by you to try to help guide the council.
And they're looking, there are a few different options. They're gonna make a recommendation which one is best to the council, and that's a decision we need to make about how we're gonna proceed.
Mayor,
Yes.
it's good to see that everybody's on the same page with the comprehensive plan. Some of us here struggled over 4 years to get an economic development committee and director. And then we talked about a 5-year rolling comprehensive plan, so that's a positive. David, you've only been here since Monday. I appreciate that. If my calculations are right on operations only, for the general operations, we're at a 4.4% deficit projection. Have you had a chance to sit down and sharpen your pencil, go through this with a fine-tooth comb and meet with staff or department heads? Excuse me, I'll take this call. Yet or not?
No, I have not. So it's, I just haven't had that opportunity yet.
I would just be much more comfortable as a member of this council to have a balanced budget. I understand what you're saying about, when we use words, we hope, we think maybe, right? That maybe we won't have to use the 8.8 million, was it, projected? 8.6? But it's better to look at it, in my opinion, conservatively, to look at it as a balanced budget and say we can have budget amendments if it comes back in the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter. You can bring it back with, recommendations and proposals to then spend that money, as opposed to putting together a budget that's got a 4.4% hole in it.
Yeah, and I will say this, and no criticism about having conservative, but sometimes I think as we talk about this operating deficit, too often I think the public and others who just don't have the knowledge and the inner workings will come to the wrong conclusions. That, such a large operating deficit, gee, something really must be wrong. But because of that, and because sometimes of the mixed messages or the miscommunication that goes along with maybe a very conservative budgeting, another alternative could be is to come up with maybe be more moderately conservative, or let's look at, because when you look at the prior year actuals on salaries and expenditures and revenue, if we put more of the priority on that, I think as we look at final adoption of the budget, there wouldn't be that much of an operating deficit. And realistically, it's, as we talk about vacancies, I've never seen, especially in Bloomington, we've never had full occupancy for all the officers or firefighters. It just doesn't happen in this day and age, especially with the baby boomers retiring. So to me, it's realistic to say, well, let's come in and let's budget a little more realistically, at least for a year or two, until based more on actual data on vacancies, because then you can start reducing some of the expenditures, and I think you send a better, more positive, realistic message to the public. And you're not showing that big gap between prior year's actual and next year's budget that takes that big jump. And then you have to get in the explanation.
We have a very conservative revenue outlook and a much more liberal expenditure outlook. Yeah. Let's be more realistic, and I agree, and you've been able to accomplish that in 48 hours?
We can have that ready by the by the public hearing. I think if you'd like to see that as an option, I think we can put something together and come back and show we can still accomplish everything, but look at a way to be more realistic on that operating deficit, especially in the general fund. I think it'd be worth your while to have us prepare that and bring it back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree, because to follow up on that, And realistically, we're seeing numbers that don't exist. We know we're not fully staffed, but the budget reflects that in January 1st, all these jobs are gonna be filled. So I think it would be more, and I do appreciate the conservative, Mr. Gadot, I'd rather see you be wrong on your projections this way than wrong at the end of the year. Every year, we cut in significantly to what's been projected at the beginning, but I do think more realistic numbers might be better.
Well, and I was just gonna add, because, if you look at last year's closeout, people have to understand that, I think it was $5 million of it was conscious choice by council, for capital. I mean, we had to get 44 police cars. I mean, let's be frank, we had some police cars that were starting on fire because the catalytic converter was starting the carpet on fire with the holes in the floor pan. This is a reality. I mean, I'm not saying every car was like that. So people have to understand that was a one-time purchase, and we did say we're gonna draw on reserve for that. And it really left us outside of that with roughly a $2 million deficit. And if I recall, the state took away 1.9 million. So that last 2 million, 2 million that we didn't cover last year. Other than that, the last couple of years before that, we had, if I remember right, we had surpluses, right? But we also showed deficits on a projection all those years. So I like the realistic approach because I really want to know within a finer window what we're really looking at.
And I think the caveat is always, and I think the positive justification for doing that is you have a very strong fund balance. And I think the city needs to be commended, the council, the directors and the staff, and you have that going for you. So, we can be more realistic in those projections, but we do have a very healthy fund balance to fall back on if, if something does go, not according to plan. So I think that's the balancing aspect of being a little more realistic.
And David, I would agree with you, because if something comes up and didn't work out quite, you can call it a minor emergency. That's what a fund balance is for.
Exactly.
I'm just never comfortable with planning or predicting based on, that's not an emergency, that's within our control.
Right. Mm-hmm.
To try to whittle that down a bit as you're describing.
Yeah. Okay. We'll bring that back for you.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments?
Just two things, actually, to kind of follow up on the $8.6 million fund balance, what we were discussing here. Jim, what did we, for the current year, what did we budget using the fund balance or digging into the fund balance? It was around $7 or $8 million, I think.
I think it was 6.8 for last year, for this year.
6.8 for the current year?
I believe so.
We budgeted 7.7 million use. The current estimated year end is to use 1.6 million.
So there you have it. I think, just to your point, we projected 7.7 and we're gonna be under 2 million. So I think that's a great exercise, Mayor, that.
Well, and you have to add to it that we didn't project for the state to take $2.5 million.
$2.5 million from us as well.
So we would be looking projection.
At a positive fund balance.
Right, so it would have been 8 million to the positive.
Right.
Which I do compliment you, Mr. Gadot. I'd much rather be wrong conservatively
absolutely.
than spend more than what we have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then just one more question. I know, and it's been a couple of years, maybe Marty or possibly even you, Mayor. I know that, we had, the county obviously is building a new courthouse, and we had made some commitments to them as far as when they broke ground, we would have to contribute, I think it was $500,000 a year. I don't recall exactly, because it's been a couple of years, exactly when that kicks in. Marty, or maybe you can help us with that?
I can.
If it's budgeted. Okay.
It is the building of the foundation.
Okay.
I wanted to make it very specific.
Okay. Well,
And
there
that,
you have it.
so,
And are they gonna get to that point this year, or no?
not sure.
Not sure. Okay.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Learn
Okay.
something, yeah.
All right.
Well, they haven't knocked the old one down yet, so.
Right. Okay.
The estimate is they'll have that done next year,
Next year meaning 19 or?
2018. that-
So the $500,000 is budgeted, but we're just not sure.
It's
we're gonna
not
pay?
budgeted.
It's not budgeted. Okay.
So once they build the foundation, the next year starts our contribution of
Great. So it
$500,000.
wouldn't be an 18 anyway. it'd be
So I don't see them putting in the foundation this year.
19. Okay.
As Marty said, they haven't knocked the old building down yet. But their projections are they're gonna have that foundation in next year. So the 2019 budget would have to have that $500,000 payment.
And of course, we'd have to review that to make sure that, whatever it says, that's what we gotta do.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, question, Jim, on the fund balance, what is it, 44 million, 46 million?
Correct.
Okay, Is that including the 15 million that we used for Evergreen Terrace that hasn't been repaid yet? Or are you
No.
taking that out?
Evergreen Terrace is a separate fund now.
I'm sorry?
That deficit is showing in the Evergreen Terrace Fund, not in the general fund. We are gonna, since we've taken possession of Evergreen Terrace, the Evergreen Terrace Fund will become an enterprise fund. And once we get a handle on how much revenue it's generating, then there will be some extra revenue to start bringing that fund $17 million deficit down. I seen a preliminary thing from the prior owners that they were earning $1 million a year above in expenditures. I don't trust that one bit, but once Holstein gets in there and starts putting some budgets and numbers together, then we'll have a better handle on that. But it is no longer in the general fund.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you, Jim.
Mayor, I only have one last question. I just want
Sure.
to, are we all going to just ignore the 500,000 for the Rialto? We did a lot of talk about it last year. I think that they should come forward and make a presentation of hard numbers of what they did through the end of the fiscal year, which is July 1st, June 31st, and where they're at right now.
Well, I did meet with them. I think we've all met with them.
I met with them.
privately. I think they're willing to do it.
Okay.
If you want them to come forward, they'll do
Yeah,
it.
because at my meeting, and this isn't a negative statement, but at my meeting, there were no hard numbers. I don't know if you guys saw different things. I was expecting kind of like tables and graphs, maybe a presentation thing, and they talked about how they think they've met the requirements, the 30 shows. They did say that, but that still could be up for debate. But it's in the budget, and it's no less controversial now than it was a year ago. And I just don't want to say. I mean, if everybody feels like we don't need to discuss it, well, I'm not going to sit up and talk to myself. I'll go home and sit in the closet and do that. But I just wanted to bring it up, throw it out there because it's in the budget. $500,000 again for the Rialto, and we need them to bring forward numbers. And one thing I was told at the meeting is that I could have swore back a year and a half ago, whatever, that we talked about a monthly report to the city, maybe through the finance, on the shows. And when I brought that up, my understanding is we weren't receiving monthly reports. I was told that their position was we never wanted a monthly report. So I want some hard numbers, moving forward, and not just some attaboys.
Well, like I said, I met with them last week, and I think they're more than willing to come forward, so I will ask them to make a presentation, I guess, at the next meeting. You have gone over their numbers in their books, correct, Mr. Gadati?
I've seen them, but what Councilman Hugg's asking for, I've not seen. In other words, they don't ever tell me how much they make per show. And I will point out, to your point, is we need a new IGA. Our current IGA is going to run out, so it's up to council to negotiate that. And again, just because it's in the budget doesn't mean you have to spend it.
And there's a link that comes to City Hall, whether it comes to Mr. Gandati or just the city manager. But the budget information, the monthly meeting information comes here to the city. Came here to the city before, and it still comes here to the city.
Yeah, they do the breakdown per show in their document.
But they're more than prepared to come here.
Okay, good.
And they'll be here at whenever you want.
Probably the next budget meeting.
Perfect.
I do have an update on the courthouse. So here's what the agreement. This is what the agreement says: is 30 days after start of construction, which date shall commence on the date footings for the new courthouse are inspected and approved.
Okay, great.
So,
Thank you, Marty.
And I believe there's going to be an announcement in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Next is public comments. Is there anyone that would like to speak under public comments this evening? Seeing none, we do need a motion to set the public hearing date for the proposed 2018 budget for Monday, December 18th at 5:30, and then direct the clerk's office to publish as necessary.
so moved.
Second.
Can I ask a question before we vote? Wasn't the original plan to meet the Wednesday after? I'm not sure, I don't have a calendar in front of me. Is that the same week I'm talking about, the 18th?
The 18th is pre-council, correct?
18th is pre-council meeting.
You talking about next week?
I mean,
The meeting after this first,
Right.
You meet Monday, and Tuesday, you mean a meeting on Wednesday for the budget again? 3 days in a row?
Or the week after, but if we need, further discussion, we talked about maybe, some new numbers being plugged in, and then there was a request for the Realtor to come forward.
Right, but I think this is a formality, correct?
This would be the public hearing, and we do need to have proper notification for a public hearing, so that would not be enough time for next Wednesday to have a public hearing.
Okay.
There still can be a meeting on the budget, but the actual public hearing, we would need proper notice for that.
Okay.
So to be clear, Krista, it's not necessarily this budget exactly. We could have a meeting prior to the public hearing, make some tweaks, whatever we decide to do. You just need to have X amount of time.
An official
Whatever
public
budget
hearing.
is finalized for that public hearing.
The official vote will be on the 19th. The public hearing will be held during pre-council on the 18th. So there was a motion. Did I hear a second on that?
Second.
Okay. So it's been motioned and seconded to set a public hearing date for the proposed 2018 budget for Monday, December 18th at 5:30 PM. Direct the clerk's office to publish as necessary. Councilman Dickinson?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gavin?
Aye.
Councilman Girl?
Aye.
Councilman Hug?
Aye?
Councilman Morris? Councilman Mudrin?
Aye.
Councilwoman Coleman?
Aye.
Councilman Turk?
Aye.
Motion carried. Did you want us to set the date for that Wednesday for a special meeting to be held on the budget?
I think so. I think another meeting is appropriate, unless someone disagrees.
Okay, so that would be Wednesday.
Either next Wednesday or the week after that.
The week after that's the council meeting.
No, next week's the council meeting.
No, I mean,
13th.
oh, you mean the 13th, that week after.
So either the 6th
Okay,
or the
gotcha.
13th.
I'm a week ahead, sorry.
The 13th of
Yeah,
Wednesday?
it's the 13th
Yeah.
Wednesday.
Does that work?
Yeah.
13th?
What time would
Wednesday
you?
is
Hold
better.
on, Terry?
Oh, yeah.
Same time, you want to move it up a half hour.
Whatever's fine, whatever time's convenient.
5:30.
Whatever you want.
While we have with this time, we want to move it up, that's what I'm just saying. It's a busy week for everybody.
Want to do it 5:30 next, on the 13th?
Yeah, 5:30 work.
Sure.
So we'll send a notice out for a special meeting to discuss the budget on December 13th at 5:30 PM. We did receive a request for a closed session this evening, so I will need a motion to go into closed session to discuss personnel and pending litigation, after which the meeting will be adjourned.
So moved.
Second.
Then motion and seconded to go into closed session to discuss personnel and pending litigation. Councilwoman Gavin?
Aye.
Councilman Girl?
Aye.
Councilman Hug?
Aye?
Councilman Morris?
Aye.
Councilman Mudrin?
Aye.
Councilwoman Coleman?
Aye.
Councilman Turk?
Aye.
Councilman Dickinson?
Aye.
Motion carried.